Get ready for a masterclass in positional chess. It's the legendary Jose Raul Capablanca against the ever-aggressive Frank James Marshall in a game for the ages. The game kicks off with a queen's gambit declined. Both sides develop logically, but Marshall immediately puts on the pressure with a bishop check to b4, and Capablanca's response is just brilliant. He plays bishop to d2, calmly blocking the check and inviting a trade. The idea is to recapture with the knight, accelerating his development and solidifying his center. What a move! Marshall takes the bait, trading bishops. White recaptures with the knight, and the game settles down as both players fianchetto their bishops and castle their kings to safety. A quiet, positional battle is brewing. The fight for the center heats up. Capablanca trades pawns on d5 and then immediately pushes his e-pawn to e4, grabbing space and kicking black's knight out to the b4 square. Marshall challenges white's center with a pawn push to c5, but Capablanca is happy to simplify, capturing the pawn and clarifying the central tension. And here's the first small slip from Marshall. He recaptures with his b-pawn to c5, but this was an inaccuracy. Taking with the queen would have kept his pawn structure solid. Now, Capablanca can punish this with the powerful knight jump to c4, dominating the center and targeting black's weaknesses. Capablanca doesn't hesitate, jumping his knight straight to c4. Marshall responds by developing his bishop to b7, completing his piece development. Another absolutely stunning move from Capablanca. He plays knight to e5, planting a monster in the center and offering a trade. He wants to eliminate black's defending knight to open up lines for a decisive attack. Just beautiful, crushing logic. The knights come off the board, Capablanca's queen takes control on e5, his rook seizes the open d-file, and suddenly all of white's pieces are perfectly placed. And the pressure just keeps mounting. Queen to c3 is another subtle, brilliant move. Capablanca prepares to invade on the d-file, daring black to trade rooks, which will only increase white's positional dominance. Every move is a hammer blow. Marshall decides to trade rooks with a capture on d1. But this is exactly what Capablanca wanted. This is an inaccuracy that simplifies into an even worse position for black. The better idea was knight to b8, trying to untangle his pieces. Now white's remaining rook will be an absolute monster. And of course, Capablanca recaptures with his rook to d1. The engine confirms this is the only move that keeps the massive advantage, and Capa finds it without breaking a sweat. Marshall brings his own rook to d8, desperately trying to challenge white's control of the file. A rare moment. Capablanca has a chance to land a knockout blow, but he misses the most clinical continuation. The winning idea was to trade rooks immediately. The rook captures on d8 with check. The queen is forced to recapture. Then, the queen swings to b3. After queen to d7, the knight hops to a5 and black's position is collapsing. But back in the game, Capablanca plays the slightly less precise rook to d3 and Marshall gets a small window to breathe. And Marshall uses that chance to play knight to b8, finally getting his knight back into the game. Now Capablanca forces the issue, capturing the rook on d8 with check. And Marshall finds the only good reply, recapturing with his queen to d8. Any other move would have been disastrous. White's queen slides over to b3, putting immediate pressure on black's weak pawns and eyeing new targets. But here comes another inaccuracy from black. Bishop to a6 looks active, but it abandons a key defensive post. The much better move was bishop to c6, keeping an eye on the vulnerable e6 pawn. Now Capablanca has a clear target to attack, and Capablanca pounces. His bishop swings immediately to h3, taking aim directly at the weak e6 pawn. This is the decisive moment. Marshall needed to defend his weak pawn, but instead he makes a critical error. The only way to hold on was to step the king out of the way. King moves to f7. White would push the pawn to e5. After bishop takes the knight on c4 and queen recaptures, black could even get some counterplay with queen to d1 check. But in the actual game, Marshall plays knight to c6, and this allows a crushing tactic that effectively ends the game. Capablanca cashes in, taking the pawn on e6 with check. After the king moves, his bishop lands on d5, becoming an absolute monster that paralyzes black's position. Absolutely incredible. Queen to a4 is a brilliant game-ending shot. Capablanca forces a series of trades that liquidates the position into a simple, technically one endgame where his advantages are overwhelming. The final touch of a master. The pieces come off the board just as planned, and with the position simplified, Capablanca calmly tucks his king away on g2. Marshall is fighting for his life, but his next move misses the final chance to create some problems. There was a glimmer of hope if he had pushed a pawn. The pawn rushes to h5. After white plays h3, black continues with h4. Then, after b4, black can even break open the kingside with pawn takes g3. Instead of that, Marshall plays his queen to g4, which allows white's passed e-pawn to become the hero of the game, and there it goes. The e-pawn marches forward, forcing a trade, and white's queen simply gobbles up the loose pawn on c5. The end is now very near. Capablanca begins the final hunt. A check on f8, followed by a beautiful bishop check on g8, forces Marshall's king out into the open where it can't hide. And this is the key. Queen to d6. Check. The engine confirms this is the only move that continues the winning attack, forcing the king further into a deadly mating net. Absolute precision, black's king is in a world of trouble, and this next move is the final, fatal mistake. The only way to prolong the fight, though still losing, was to block with the queen. Queen blocks on g6. White would take the pawn on e5. After queen to f6, the queens would be traded with check, and after pawn recaptures, black could at least fight on a little longer. But in the game, Marshall plays the pawn to g6, and this walks directly into a forced checkmate sequence. And Capablanca delivers the final blow, queen to f8 with check. This begins a short but unstoppable mating attack, and Marshall has no defense. Seeing the inevitable checkmate on the board, Frank Marshall resigned. A stunning display of positional pressure and tactical precision from Raul Capablanca, who wins the game.